The wind moved slowly across the wide, empty fields. The land was dry, cracked, and silent, except for the creak of an old wooden gate. Jacob sat on his porch, his rifle resting across his knees. His face was rough, his beard long and gray, and his eyes carried the weight of too many lonely years. The ranch had once been alive, filled with laughter, animals, and friends who came to trade. Now only the animals remained, and even they seemed to sense the sadness that hung over their master. Jacob's days were always the same. Wake up before the sun, check the fences, feed the few animals still alive, and sit quietly as the day passed. At night, he stared at the sky, waiting for nothing. He had no family, no neighbors, no reason to live beyond the next sunrise. He often told himself, "One day I will lie down, and I will not rise again. That day will be fine." The planet he lived on was not kind. The air was dry and sharp, the nights cold enough to freeze water in the troughs. Strange sounds echoed in the dark, creatures hunting, raiders moving, storms rising. But Jacob did not care anymore. He was ready for death, and he thought death was ready for him too. That night, however, something unusual happened. Jacob had just finished pouring himself a small drink when he noticed lights moving in the distance. Not stars, not meteors, but moving lights weaving slowly across the horizon. His first thought was raiders. The second thought was smugglers. Trouble always came with lights at night. He tightened his grip on the rifle. The lights grew closer, drifting like fireflies, but steady in their path. They stopped near his outer fence, and he could hear faint sounds, low voices, almost whispers carried by the wind. His old dog barked once, then whined and ran under the porch. That made Jacob's chest tighten. The dog was fearless, yet it hid. Whatever was out there was not normal. He stood, his knees aching, and stepped off the porch. The sand crunched under his boots as he walked slowly toward the gate. His hand rested firmly on the rifle's stock. He had decided long ago he would not be taken alive if raiders came for him. Tonight might be that night. When he reached the gate, he saw them. 11 figures, cloaked and hooded, standing close together as if afraid of being seen. Their shapes were slim, not bulky like armored men. They moved with weakness, swaying as if the wind itself might knock them over. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the tallest figure stepped forward and lowered her hood. Jacob's breath caught. It was not a man at all. A woman. An alien woman. Her skin was pale silver with faint glowing marks that ran across her face like rivers. Her eyes were wide and tired, but they carried a desperate fire. Behind her, the other cloaked figures lowered their hoods too, one by one, until Jacob saw the truth. 11 women. 11 alien widows. Each face was different, some with scales, some with faint fur, some with delicate features, but all were marked by grief. Their clothes were torn, their bodies thin from hunger, their eyes haunted. The leader's lips trembled as she tried to speak. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking against the silence of the night. "Please, let us stay." Jacob felt his heart pound in his chest. He had lived alone for so long, and now 11 strangers stood at his gate, asking for shelter. His mind screamed caution. Strangers meant danger. Strangers brought secrets, enemies, blood. Yet his eyes saw something else: desperation, fear, and a deep sadness that was heavier than his own. The women did not move closer. They only stood there, waiting, as if the wrong answer would crush what little life remained in them. The wind pulled at their cloaks, revealing thin arms, shaking hands, and faces that looked as if they had not rested in weeks. Jacob lifted his rifle slightly. The women flinched, but none ran. His voice was rough from silence, and when he spoke it sounded more like a growl. "Who are you?" The leader swallowed hard. "We are widows," she said softly. "Our men are gone. Our homes are ash. We have no place left. If you turn us away, we will not see the morning." Her words sank into Jacob like stones dropped in a dry well. He had wanted death for himself, but now death was asking for them. 11 women, standing at his broken fence, begging for life. He looked at the sky, then at the dark fields, then back at them. Something inside him shifted, something he thought had died years ago. He felt the weight of choice pressing on his shoulders. He could send them away, close the gate, and drink until morning. Or he could open the gate and let them in, let strangers, widows, and their unknown troubles into his life. The silence stretched. The women's eyes glowed faintly in the starlight, watching him, waiting. Even the wind seemed to pause. Jacob's finger tapped against the rifle. His chest rose and fell. He felt the old dog brush against his leg, whimpering softly, as if urging him to decide. Finally, Jacob took a deep breath. He reached out, his hand rough against the iron latch of the gate. His voice was heavy, almost unwilling, yet certain. "Come inside." The women gasped, relief and fear mixing in their eyes. Slowly, one by one, they stepped past the gate, their cloaks brushing against Jacob as they entered his land. He could smell the dust on them, the scent of long travel, the faint trace of burned homes. As the last woman passed, Jacob closed the gate behind them. He felt the lock click, and with it, he felt something click inside his own chest. For years, he had waited for death in silence. But tonight, death had been replaced by something else: uncertainty, danger, and perhaps even hope. Jacob walked ahead of them, back toward the porch light. 11 shadows followed him into the house, into his quiet world. He did not know their secrets. He did not know what hunted them. He only knew one thing. His lonely ranch was no longer empty. The wooden door closed with a slow creak, and silence filled the small ranch house. The fire in the hearth flickered, throwing long shadows on the walls. Jacob sat heavily in his chair, his rifle resting across his lap, his eyes fixed on the 11 women standing together near the entrance. They did not spread out or sit down. They stayed close, huddled like frightened birds, watching him with guarded eyes. The air inside was warmer than the night outside, but their bodies still trembled. Dust clung to their cloaks, and the smell of travel, sweat, smoke, and faint herbs filled the room. Jacob's dog sniffed at them once, then hid again under the table, unsettled. Jacob noticed the women's eyes follow the dog nervously, as if even the harmless animal could turn against them. "Sit," Jacob muttered, his voice rough. He gestured toward the benches and chairs along the walls. Slowly, the widows obeyed, but not all at once. Some hesitated, scanning the corners of the room as if checking for traps. Only when the leader sat did the others lower themselves to the wooden seats. Jacob reached for the pot hanging above the fire. He poured them warm broth into metal cups, the smell of old vegetables and salt filling the air. He handed the cups to them one by one. Some drank quickly, others sniffed suspiciously before sipping. One woman set hers aside untouched, her sharp eyes never leaving Jacob's face. As they ate, Jacob studied them. They were not from one tribe, not from one world. He saw the differences in their faces and their markings. One had pale blue skin that shimmered faintly. Another had golden eyes with narrow pupils. Another bore delicate tattoos like vines across her arms. 11 women, 11 kinds of beauty, 11 types of grief. Jacob cleared his throat. "You said your men are gone," he said. "How?" The leader lowered her gaze, her hands tight around the cup. "War," she whispered. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of death. "Our husbands were called to fight. None returned." Another widow spoke sharply, bitterness cutting her tone. "They promised us honor if we stayed loyal. Honor does not feed a child. Honor does not keep us alive." A third leaned forward, her eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "Our clans cast us out. Without men, we are nothing. We were told to leave or die as useless mouths." Jacob's jaw tightened. He had seen many kinds of cruelty in his life, but to abandon women because their men were gone, this was a cruelty he could not understand. Still, he felt a knot forming in his gut. These women were not only victims, they were desperate, and desperate people often carried danger with them. The fire cracked. Jacob noticed one woman's gaze fixed too long on his rifle. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Another widow sat stiffly, refusing to drink or eat, her hands clenched on her knees as if she were ready to spring. Jacob leaned back, his chair groaning. "If I give you shelter, you bring your troubles with you. What are you hiding?" His voice cut through the room like a blade. The leader lifted her head. Her silver-marked face was calm, but her eyes burned. "We hide nothing. We only ask for a roof, for food, for a chance to live." But Jacob did not believe her fully. He had lived too long to trust words alone. He saw the way one widow glanced nervously at the door each time the wind howled outside. He saw how another touched the scars on her arm, almost like a habit of fear. These women were running, not only from hunger and loneliness, but from something darker. The silence stretched. Only the fire popped, only the wind groaned against the wooden walls. Finally, one widow broke it. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. "If you send us away, we will die. We know it. We will freeze or be taken. Is that what you want, human?" Jacob's chest tightened. He had thought himself ready for death, ready to face the cold alone. But watching 11 women, thin, broken, eyes full of shadows, sit before him begging for life was not what he expected. The leader placed her cup down gently. "You want to know our truth," she said slowly. "Our husbands died in war. Our clans cast us aside. But there is more. The ones who killed our men hunt us still. They do not forgive survivors. They chase widows for reasons you may not wish to hear." Jacob's grip on his rifle hardened. His mind began to turn. If these women spoke truth, then their enemies could be near, perhaps already watching from the dark fields beyond his fence. The widows did not press him for answers. They simply waited, silent and heavy with grief, their faces flickering in the firelight. Jacob could not shake the feeling that something was missing from their story. 11 widows together, crossing barren lands to reach his lonely ranch. It was no accident. He stood suddenly, his chair scraping. The widows flinched at the sound, their eyes snapping to him like startled animals. Jacob moved to the window, peering into the night. The fields lay empty, the stars cold and distant. Yet his heart beat hard in his chest, warning him. He felt eyes out there, unseen. Behind him, the leader's voice spoke again, low and firm. "We ask only for shelter. But know this, human, those who seek us are ruthless. If you keep us here, danger will follow." Jacob turned, his eyes meeting hers. Her words confirmed what his instincts already screamed. These women were not just victims. They were carriers of secrets, and with those secrets came enemies. The firelight danced in the room, painting their tired faces with gold and shadow. 11 women sat before him, strangers bound by sorrow, and Jacob knew the peace of his lonely ranch was already gone. The question hung heavy in the air, unspoken but sharp as steel. Were they his salvation, or the death he had been waiting for? The night was cold, and the old ranch house creaked with the weight of the wind pressing against its walls. Jacob could not sleep. He lay on his narrow bed with his rifle resting nearby, his eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling. 11 strangers now slept under his roof. His house, once filled only with silence, now carried the faint sound of soft breaths, quiet whispers, and the rustle of cloaks shifting in the dark. Every few minutes, Jacob thought he heard footsteps. Once he rose quickly, grabbing the rifle, but when he stepped into the hallway, it was only 2 of the widows carrying buckets of water. They froze when they saw him, their wide eyes shining in the dim light. One of them bowed her head quickly, whispering, "Forgive us, human. We only fetch water." The other avoided his eyes, moving past him like a shadow. Jacob's hand tightened on the rifle. He did not lower it until the women disappeared again into the corner room they shared. He returned to his bed, but sleep refused to come. Something about them unsettled him. They were weak, hungry, broken, yet there was a weight around them, a hidden strength or secret that made his skin itch with unease. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, leaving the house wrapped in dim orange glow. Jacob thought of their words, widows of war, cast out by their clans, hunted. He wanted to believe it, but doubt clawed at him. A sound broke his thoughts, soft like a child's cough. Jacob frowned. He pushed himself up and followed the sound to the far room. The door was slightly open. Inside, the widows lay close together, cloaks wrapped tightly around them. Some stirred in restless sleep, others stared silently at the ceiling. And in the corner, a small shape moved. Jacob froze when he saw her. A little alien girl, no more than 7 years old, sat curled in a blanket, her large eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She coughed again, her tiny frame shivering. Her mother, one of the widows, pressed a hand to her forehead and whispered softly in a tongue Jacob did not know. He stepped inside before thinking. The women stirred, some sitting up quickly, alarm flashing in their eyes. One hissed, "What do you want, human?" The mother of the child pulled the girl closer, shielding her. Jacob raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. His voice was low, rough but steady. "I didn't know there was a child." The women exchanged tense glances. Finally, the mother nodded once, her eyes full of sadness. "She is mine," she said. "Her father fell in war. She has only me now." The little girl looked at Jacob, her eyes full of fear and curiosity. She coughed again, her lips dry, her skin pale under the dim glow. Jacob's chest tightened. He saw his past in that child's face, saw his own daughter who had once coughed the same way before the fever took her. He turned his head away, hiding the pain that threatened to surface. One of the widows whispered sharply, "Do not look at her. She is not your concern." Jacob's jaw clenched. He spoke slowly, each word heavy. "She needs a blanket. She will freeze tonight." The mother's lips trembled. "We have none," she admitted. "We gave all to cover her. It is not enough." Without another word, Jacob left the room. The women followed him with cautious eyes, whispering behind him. He returned a moment later with his own thick blanket, worn but warm. He knelt, placing it gently over the child. Her wide eyes softened as the warmth wrapped around her small body. She whispered a word, soft, broken, but full of gratitude. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She did not speak, but she bowed her head low. Jacob stood, his face hard, and left the room without another word. Back in the hallway, he stopped, leaning against the wall. His hand trembled slightly as it rested on the rifle. The memory of his lost daughter burned inside him, but he pushed it down. He could not afford to feel. Not now. Not with 11 strangers who carried secrets and danger. He returned to his bed, but the night did not allow peace. Strange howls rose from the far fields, long and sharp, echoing against the hills. The widows stirred, their whispers carrying through the thin walls. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Those were not ordinary animals. The sound carried a pattern, a rhythm. He had heard such cries before, scouts calling to each other. His stomach knotted. Perhaps their enemies were closer than he thought? Perhaps they already knew where the widows had fled. He gripped the rifle tightly, his finger brushing the trigger guard. In the dark, his dog pressed against his leg, whimpering. Jacob whispered softly to calm it, but his own heart was restless. The widows had brought more than grief and hunger. They had brought danger to his land, danger that could strike at any moment. He sat awake until the first light of dawn pushed through the window. The ranch stretched quiet under the pale morning sun, but the unease remained. His house was no longer his own. 11 women and 1 child had changed it. They had filled the silence with whispers, fear, and secrets. Jacob looked out across the fields, his jaw tight. He had taken them in for one night, but the question pressed harder now. Could he keep them here without losing himself, without losing his ranch? Behind him, the child coughed again, a small sound that carried heavy weight. Jacob closed his eyes. He knew, even before admitting it, that he would not turn them away. But as the wind carried another distant howl across the hills, he also knew this. Trouble was coming. It was only a matter of time. The days moved slowly on the ranch, but everything felt different now. Jacob was not alone anymore. The 11 widows worked alongside him, though their hands were not used to ranch life. He showed them how to carry water from the well, how to feed the cattle, and how to mend the broken fences. Some learned quickly, their movements sharp and clever. Others struggled, their soft hands blistering as they pulled rope or lifted buckets. Jacob watched them carefully. He did not trust easily, but he could not deny that life returned to the land. Where silence once ruled, there were now voices. Strange accents, quiet laughter, even the sound of songs sung in alien tongues. In the evenings, the women gathered near the fire, preparing meals with whatever they could find. Sometimes they added herbs or spices he did not know, filling the room with smells that reminded them of distant homes. The little alien girl followed Jacob everywhere. She would stand at the edge of the field, her big, glowing eyes fixed on him as he worked. At first, Jacob tried to ignore her, but the child's quiet presence pressed on his heart. She reminded him of what he had lost long ago, and though he said nothing, he began leaving small pieces of food aside for her, pretending it was nothing. For a short while, it almost felt safe. Jacob let himself believe the ranch could remain untouched by the outside world, but safety was a fragile dream. One morning, while walking the fields, he noticed something strange. Tracks in the dirt, heavy boots, more than one set. Jacob crouched low, pressing his hand to the marks. The soil was still fresh. Whoever had passed through had done so during the night. He straightened, his jaw tightening. His land was no longer private. Someone was watching. That evening, as the sun fell, Jacob climbed the ridge behind his ranch. From there, he could see the wide horizon. Dust rose in the distance, moving slowly. His sharp eyes narrowed. Riders, not farmers, not traders. Armed men. He returned quickly to the house. The widows saw his face and grew tense. The leader of the women, the one with the silver-marked skin, stepped forward. "What did you see?" she asked, her voice low. "Scouts," Jacob answered. "They're not far. They'll be here soon." The room fell into silence. The The widows exchanged nervous glances, some clutching their cloaks tightly, others bowing their heads as if preparing for the worst. The little girl pressed against her mother, eyes wide with fear. One of the widows whispered, her voice trembling, "They found us." Jacob turned sharply. "So it's true then. You're being hunted." His voice was rough, more accusation than question. The leader met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, the ones who killed our men do not let widows live. We escape them, but they follow." Another widow added quickly, "They will come tonight or tomorrow. They will burn your ranch to the ground if you do not give us up." Jacob's chest tightened. His ranch was all he had left. He had been ready to die on it, but he had never thought strangers would bring an army to his gate. His first instinct was anger. He wanted to shout, to order them away. But when his eyes fell on the little girl clinging to her mother, he bit back the words. He paced the floor, his boots striking hard against the wooden boards. "If I keep you here, I invite death," he growled. "But if I send you away, you'll die before the morning." The leader stepped closer, her voice steady but desperate. "We will fight beside you. We are not helpless." Jacob studied her face. Her body was thin, her hands soft. She looked nothing like a soldier. But the fire in her eyes told him she meant what she said. Still, the thought of 11 widows facing armed raiders felt impossible. The night came heavy and dark. Jacob sat on his porch with his rifle across his knees. The widows huddled inside. His dog growled softly, ears twitching at every sound in the distance. The land stretched wide and quiet, but Jacob knew danger was near. He had seen those tracks. He had seen that dust. Then, faintly, he caught it, the glimmer of fire on the horizon. Torches, moving closer. Jacob's breath slowed, his grip on the rifle tightening. The widows pressed against the window, whispering prayers in tongues he did not know. Their fear filled the air like smoke. The leader came to the door, her face pale in the starlight. "What will you do, human?" she asked. Jacob did not look at her. His eyes stayed on the approaching glow. "What I've always done," he said slowly. "Stand my ground." The widows said nothing. Some wept quietly. Others closed their eyes as if preparing for the end. The little girl clutched her mother's hand tightly, whispering, "I'm scared." The glow on the horizon grew brighter. The sound of hooves and shouting voices began to carry across the fields. Jacob's ranch, once lonely and silent, was about to become a battlefield. He rose from his chair, his back straight, his face hard. For years he had waited to die in silence. Now death was coming to his gate, but he was not alone anymore. 11 widows stood behind him, their lives tied to his choice. Jacob walked into the house, set down his rifle for a moment, and looked at them all. "If you stay here," he said, "you fight with me. If you run, you die. Decide now." The leader stepped forward, her silver markings glowing faintly in the firelight. Her voice was steady. "We stay. We fight." The others nodded, fear in their eyes but resolve in their hearts. For the first time since they had come to his door, Jacob believed them. They were broken, yes, but they were not cowards. Outside, the night roared with the approach of enemies. Inside, the widows and the lonely rancher prepared for war. The night broke with fire. Flames rose at the edge of the ranch as the raiders lit torches and hurled them toward the fences. Dry wood caught quickly, smoke curling into the black sky. Jacob stood at the gate, rifle steady in his hands, his jaw locked. The widows huddled behind him at first, but when the first shout rang out, they spread like startled birds, each grabbing what little weapon they could find. Knives from the kitchen, wooden poles, even heavy stones from the yard. The raiders came fast, their shadows long under the torchlight. They rode on beasts with hard hooves, their armor gleaming dully, their voices rough with hunger for violence. Jacob raised his rifle and fired. The crack of the shot cut through the air. One raider fell from his mount, his scream echoing across the field. The others roared in fury. The widows froze for a moment, staring at Jacob with wide eyes. They had never seen a human fight. Jacob did not pause. He fired again, then again, each shot sharp and deadly. The beasts reared, riders falling. But still more came. "Inside!" Jacob shouted to the women. "Barricade the doors!" But the leader stepped forward instead, pulling something small and glowing from under her cloak. She pressed it to the ground, and suddenly a field of blue sparks rose around part of the ranch fence. The raiders' beasts balked, refusing to cross. Jacob's eyes widened. "What the hell is that?" he barked. She did not look at him. "A shield." My husband was an engineer. I took this when I ran. Another widow moved swiftly, climbing the roof. From her cloak, she pulled small spheres, pressing her thin fingers to them until they lit red. When the raiders drew near, she hurled them down. The spheres exploded with loud bangs and bright flashes, sending men sprawling, their beasts shrieking in panic. Jacob realized then, these women were not only victims. Each carried a piece of skill, of knowledge, of survival left to them by their dead husbands. The battle grew fierce. Raiders broke through the far fence, charging toward the barn. Jacob ran to cut them off, his rifle spitting fire, his knife flashing when one got too close. His old body burned with effort, but his spirit roared. For years, he had waited for death. Tonight, he would not wait. He would fight. One widow cried out as a raider grabbed her by the arm. She slashed at him with a kitchen knife, but he was too strong. Jacob turned his rifle, but before he could shoot, another widow leapt from the shadows, swinging a heavy wooden beam. It cracked against the raider's helmet, sending him crashing into the dirt. She stood over him, her chest heaving, eyes blazing. The little alien girl clung to her mother inside the house, but even she did not stay silent. When a raider burst through the window, snarling, the child screamed so loud it froze the man for an instant. Her mother seized the moment, stabbing him with a jagged piece of metal until he fell. The air filled with smoke, fire, and the clash of battle cries. Jacob's dog leapt into the fight, biting and pulling at Raider's legs, refusing to let go even when struck. Jacob fought beside the widows as if they had always been his allies, moving from one corner of the ranch to the other, driving the raiders back step by step. The leader of the raiders rode in last. He was taller than the others, with heavy black armor and a cruel laugh that carried over the flames. "You think one old human and a handful of broken women can stop me?" he shouted, raising a long blade. Jacob raised his rifle, but the man moved quickly, knocking it aside. The blade cut across Jacob's arm, burning with pain. He staggered, blood dripping onto the dirt. The raider pressed forward, towering over him. Before the killing blow could fall, 3 widows rushed at once. One hurled a spear made from a broken fence post, striking his side. Another leapt on his back, clawing at his helmet. The leader of the widows raised the glowing device again, pressing it to his chest. Sparks exploded. The man howled, his armor searing with heat. Jacob used the chance. With his good arm, he pulled the knife from his belt and drove it into the raider's throat. The man's eyes widened in shock before he fell, choking on his own rage. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the remaining raiders, seeing their leader dead, began to retreat. Some dragged the wounded, others fled in panic. The widows stood panting, their faces streaked with sweat and ash, watching as the firelight faded with the fleeing men. Jacob dropped to his knees, his chest heaving. His arm burned with pain, blood soaking his sleeve. The widows rushed to him. One tore fabric from her cloak to bind his wound. Another sprinkled powder from a small pouch that sealed the bleeding with a hiss. He looked at them, his eyes hard but alive. "You fought," he said, his voice low. "You fought like warriors." The leader of the widows met his gaze, her silver markings glowing faintly in the dark. "We had no choice, but tonight, you chose us." Jacob stared at the smoking fields, the broken fences, the dead raiders lying across his land. His ranch was scarred, his body wounded. But for the first time in years, he felt something fierce inside him. Not despair, but purpose. The widows gathered close, silent and shaken but alive. The little girl peeked from the doorway, her eyes wide as she looked at Jacob, the old human who had stood against death and refused to fall. The night was not over. Danger would come again. But Jacob knew one thing for certain. His ranch would never be lonely again. It had become a place of fire, blood, and unexpected family. Jacob sat near the fire, his arm wrapped tightly in bandages. The pain throbbed with every heartbeat, but he did not complain. His eyes followed the flames, quiet and thoughtful, while the widows moved around the room. Some cleaned weapons taken from the dead raiders. Others tried to repair broken furniture. The little girl slept curled in a blanket beside her mother, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The house smelled of smoke and medicine. One widow knelt beside Jacob, pressing a small clay bowl into his hand. The liquid inside was thick and bitter. "Drink," she said softly. "It will fight the fever." Jacob lifted the bowl, grimaced at the taste, but forced it down. He had not trusted them before, yet now he sat here letting them heal him. His thoughts wandered. The ranch he had kept empty for years was now alive with voices and movement. His quiet death had been delayed, perhaps even stolen from him. The leader of the widows came to him then. Her silver-marked skin glowed faintly in the firelight. She sat across from him, her eyes fixed on his face. For a long moment she did not speak. Then she said quietly, "You saved us. You fought for us when you had no reason to." Jacob gave a short laugh, dry and tired. "I fought for my land, for my home. You just happened to be here." Her lips curved in a small, sad smile. "You may tell yourself that, human, but we know the truth, or you could have given us away. You did not." Jacob looked away, staring into the fire. Her words dug deep, stirring something inside him that he had buried for years. He remembered his wife, long gone. He remembered his daughter, lost to illness before the war had even started. He had chosen silence and solitude because he could not bear the weight of more loss. Yet here, in his home, sat 11 widows and a child, breathing, living, depending on him. One of the younger widows knelt near him suddenly, her voice trembling but full of fire. "We cannot keep running," she said. "We need a place to stay, a place to fight from. We need someone to stand with us." Her eyes shone as she looked at Jacob. "We need you." Jacob felt the weight of those words. His hands clenched. "I am an old man," he said roughly. "I have nothing left to give. You should find another path." But another widow spoke, her voice strong. "My husband was a soldier. He taught me how to see strength in others. I see it in you." A third added, "My mate was a healer. He taught me how to recognize broken things and how to mend them. You are broken, Jacob, but you are not beyond mending." The words struck him like hammer blows. He wanted to argue, to send them away. But the firelight revealed their faces, tired, scarred, but determined. They were not begging anymore. They were asking him to choose. The little girl stirred in her sleep then, coughing softly. Her mother rubbed her back, whispering soothing words. Jacob's eyes lingered on the child. She was too small, too fragile, yet she had survived when stronger men had not. His chest tightened. He thought of his own child again, of the small grave marked by a stone on the hill behind the ranch. The leader leaned closer, her voice low and steady. "We did not come to you by chance. We heard of you, human. The one who lived alone on a dying ranch, the one who did not bow to raiders, the one who refused to abandon his land. We came because we believed you would not abandon us either." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "So you chose me," he muttered. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "We chose you." The room grew quiet. The widows watched him with hope and fear. Outside, the night wind pressed against the walls, carrying distant echoes, too far to be clear, but enough to remind Jacob that the danger was not gone. The raiders would return, perhaps stronger, perhaps with more numbers. His ranch would be tested again. Jacob stood slowly, his body aching, but his stance firm. He walked to the window and looked out at the fields. The fences were broken, the barn half burned, the land scarred by fire and hoofprints, but it was still his land. His home. He turned back to the women. His voice was rough but steady. "If you stay here, you stay as family. Family fights together. Family dies together. Do you understand?" The leader rose, her silver-marked face shining with tears she did not let fall. "We understand, and we accept." One by one, the widows nodded. Some whispered oaths in their own languages. Others placed hands over their hearts. The air in the room shifted, heavy with promise. Jacob's dog barked then, sharp and sudden. Everyone turned. From the window, Jacob saw movement on the far hills, shadows slipping through the darkness, faint lights flickering. Scouts. The enemy was already watching again. He did not speak of it. He simply stepped back to the fire, picked up his rifle, and checked the chamber. His old hands moved with steady purpose. He looked at the women, their tired but determined faces, and the child sleeping softly in her blanket. "I was ready to die alone," he said, his voice low. "But if death comes now, it will not find me alone. It will find me standing with you." The widows did not cheer or weep. They simply bowed their heads, a quiet strength passing between them. The choice was made. Jacob sat once more, the rifle across his knees, the fire reflecting in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt the weight something more than survival. He felt the weight of belonging. And though the night was heavy with danger, Jacob's heart carried a flame that would not go out. The first light of dawn spread across the horizon, painting the dry fields in soft gold. Smoke still lingered from the night's battle, curling upward in thin trails, but the ranch still stood. Jacob stepped out onto the porch, his rifle slung over his good shoulder, his wounded arm wrapped in fresh bandages. He moved slowly, but there was a new weight in his steps, not the heaviness of despair, but the burden of responsibility. Behind him, the widows emerged one by one. Their faces were tired, their clothes torn and stained, but their eyes carried a strength that had not been there before. The little girl clutched her mother's hand, staring at the sunrise as though it were a miracle. The ranch, broken as it was, had become their only hope. Jacob scanned the land. The fences were charred and broken in places, the barn roof sagged where fire had licked through the beams, and the fields were trampled by hooves. Yet when he looked at it, he did not see ruin. He saw ground worth fighting for. He saw a home. He turned to the widows. "This place is not safe yet," he said. His voice was rough but steady. "More raiders will come. They always do. If you stay, you must work, fight, and bleed for it. This ranch is not just mine now. It will be ours if we make it so." The leader of the widows stepped forward. Her silver-marked skin shimmered faintly in the rising light. She bowed her head once, then lifted her chin. "We have nothing else left. Here we stay. Here we fight." The others nodded, voices murmuring agreement. Their hands touched each other's shoulders, forming a circle of silent promise. The work began at once. Jacob guided them as they rebuilt the fences, driving stakes into the earth with steady rhythm. Some women carried heavy beams, their faces set with determination. Others patched the barn, climbing fearlessly onto the roof to hammer broken planks back into place. The child gathered stones, piling them carefully as if she too had a part to play. Jacob watched them work, sweat glistening on their faces. They were not weak anymore. Grief still lived in their eyes, but alongside it now burned a new fire. Together, they were no longer outcasts, no longer prey. They were building something stronger than any one of them could have alone. By midday, the ranch looked different. New walls stood where gaps had been. Traps were set along the outer fields, simple snares and pits Jacob had once used for hunting. The widows added their own knowledge, small devices left by their husbands, glowing with strange lights, placed carefully at weak points in the land. When Jacob asked what they were, one widow only smiled faintly. "Surprises," she said. As the sun lowered again, the group gathered in the yard. A meal of roasted roots and meat simmered in a large pot, the smell rich and warm. They ate together, not in silence, but in quiet conversation. Laughter rose once, soft and uncertain, but real. Jacob listened to the sound and felt something stir in him, something he thought had been lost forever. After the meal, the leader approached Jacob. Her eyes held both gratitude and something sharper. "You know, human," she said softly, "you could have closed your gate that first night. You could have let the cold take us. But you didn't. You chose us, whether you admit it or not." Jacob met her gaze, his face unreadable. "I didn't choose you," he said. "I chose to do what was right. The rest happened." She smiled faintly, a sadness and respect mixed in her expression. "Then perhaps what is right has chosen you." The words lingered with him as the sky darkened. That night, the widows spread their blankets around the fire in the main room. Jacob sat at the edge, his rifle resting across his lap. The little girl, half asleep, wandered toward him. She tugged at his sleeve gently, her glowing eyes heavy with drowsiness. "Will you keep us safe, Papa?" she whispered. The words struck Jacob like a hammer. For a moment, he could not speak. His throat tightened, his heart pounding. Slowly, he placed a rough hand on her small head. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "I will." The child smiled faintly and curled up against her mother, asleep within moments. Jacob sat awake long after, staring at the fire, the word echoing in his chest. "Papa?" He had thought that part of his life ended in the grave of his daughter. Yet now, here, it had returned in the voice of a child, not of his blood. When dawn came again, Jacob rose early. The widows stirred behind him, their faces softer now, less haunted. The ranch felt alive in a way it had not in years. He walked to the gate, opened it, and looked out at the wide land stretching into the distance. He knew danger waited out there. Raiders, warlords, maybe worse. But he also knew he was not alone anymore. He whispered to himself, the words steady as stone. "If death comes, it will find me standing, and it will not find me alone." Behind him, 11 widows stepped out into the morning light, their eyes bright with new purpose. The child ran ahead, laughing softly, her small feet kicking up dust as she chased Jacob's old dog. Together, they looked across the land that was now theirs, a family built not by blood, but by survival, choice, and a promise to never give up. The lonely ranch was no longer empty. It was a fortress, a home, and the beginning of something new. And Jacob, once ready to die in silence, now stood at the heart of it, alive in ways he never expected.